He's not playing hard to get. He's not following a strategy he read somewhere online. He's not bitter or broken or quietly waiting for the right moment to start pursuing. He just doesn't chase. And somehow, that simple fact confuses people more than almost anything else about him. Women wonder if he's interested. Men wonder if something's wrong with him. And he's standing there, genuinely unbothered by both questions, which only makes the confusion worse. If you know this person, or if you are this person, this video is going to explain something that most people have never had articulated clearly. Stay till the end, because the psychology here is almost nothing like the explanations most people reach for. Let's start with what not chasing actually means, because it gets misread constantly. It doesn't mean passive. It doesn't mean disinterested. It doesn't mean emotionally unavailable in the way that phrase usually gets used. A man who doesn't chase can be deeply interested in someone. He can feel things strongly. He can want a relationship, want connection, want something real and lasting with a specific person. What he doesn't do is reorganize his life, his energy, and his self-worth around whether or not that person chooses him back. And that one distinction is the thing worth understanding, because it changes everything about how he moves through the world. Let's talk about where this comes from, because it doesn't arrive from nowhere. There's a concept in psychology called secure attachment. Developed through decades of research by John Bowlby and later Mary Ainsworth, attachment theory maps out the different ways people relate to intimacy, closeness, and the possibility of rejection based on what they learned in their earliest relationships. Securely attached people have an internal model that says, "I am worth loving, other people are generally safe, and whether or not this specific relationship works out, I will be okay." They don't need a particular person to choose them to feel complete. They don't interpret someone's disinterest as a verdict on their fundamental worth. And here's what that looks like in practice. When a securely attached man is interested in someone, he expresses it, clearly, without games, without strategy. And then he waits to see if it's reciprocated. Not anxiously, not while monitoring every signal for signs of hope, just genuinely. And if it isn't reciprocated, he feels the disappointment, processes it, and moves on without it dismantling him. That's not coldness. That's not arrogance. That's a nervous system that learned, somewhere along the way, that its value doesn't live in someone else's hands. But secure attachment is only part of the picture, because there's another type of man who doesn't chase, and his psychology runs in a completely different direction. The man who stopped chasing because he chased before, and it cost him more than he was willing to pay again. This isn't someone who never felt the pull. This is someone who felt it completely, who gave it everything, who rearranged his priorities and his self-respect around someone who ultimately didn't choose him. And he survived it. And something in him reorganized quietly after that. Not bitterly. This isn't bitterness in the conventional sense. Bitterness still cares. Bitterness is still running the same loop, just with different feelings attached to it. This is something quieter. It's a man who looked at the experience honestly and reached a conclusion about what he was and wasn't willing to offer again, before something was established that warranted it. Psychologists call this an earned, secure attachment. The distinction from natural security is that it wasn't always there. It was built, slowly, through painful experience and deliberate reflection, into something that resembles security from the outside, but carries a slightly different weight on the inside. Pause here for a second, because this is the part that tends to surprise people the most. Most people assume that men who don't chase are protecting themselves, that the non-chasing is a wall, that underneath it there's someone who wants to chase but won't let himself. And sometimes that's true, but very often it's the opposite. The man who doesn't chase isn't protecting himself from intimacy. He's protecting the integrity of the intimacy he's willing to offer. Because here's what chasing often does, in the psychological sense. It establishes a dynamic before the relationship even begins. It says, "My desire for you is stronger than my respect for my own judgment about whether you're actually showing up." It positions one person as the pursuer and one as the pursued. And that imbalance rarely resolves itself neatly once things begin. The man who doesn't chase has usually, consciously or not, decided that the only dynamic he's interested in starting is one where both people are choosing each other simultaneously, where his interest is met with interest, where his presence is welcomed rather than won. And that's not a strategy, that's a standard. Now let's talk about how this plays out in real life, because the misreadings are specific and worth addressing. The first misreading is that he's not interested. He is. He's just not performing interest in the specific way that's become culturally expected. He's not flooding someone with attention, pursuing through resistance, or escalating to prove his feelings. He's interested in a quieter, more consistent way that doesn't announce itself and doesn't require a response to keep existing. The second misreading is that he's arrogant, that he thinks he's too good to pursue anyone. This is almost always wrong. The man who doesn't chase isn't operating from superiority. He's operating from a self-respect that doesn't require external confirmation. Those look similar from the outside. They feel completely different from the inside. The third misreading, and this one matters, is that he's unavailable, that the wall is up and nothing gets through. But men who don't chase are often extraordinarily available once the right conditions exist. Once someone has shown clearly and consistently that they want to be there, the openness is real. The capacity for depth is real. The door isn't locked, it's just not being broken down by him. There's something else worth addressing: the relationship between not chasing and self-worth, because they're more connected than most people realize. Research in self-determination theory consistently finds that people with high intrinsic self-worth, whose sense of value comes from inside rather than from external sources, are significantly less susceptible to what psychologists call approval-seeking behavior. They don't need a particular outcome to feel okay about themselves. And romantic pursuit, when it becomes compulsive, when a person can't stop chasing even when the signals are clear, is almost always driven by approval-seeking at its core. The chase isn't really about the other person. It's about what that person's yes would mean about you. A man who doesn't chase has usually, somewhere in his development, unhitched his self-worth from that question. The yes would be wonderful. The no is survivable. Neither one defines him. And here's something that tends to get overlooked entirely in this conversation. Men who don't chase often have much clearer internal lives than the people around them realize. They know what they want. They know what they're willing to offer. They've thought about what a good relationship actually looks like for them, and it isn't something they're willing to compromise into existence by pursuing someone who isn't naturally moving toward them. That clarity is quiet. It doesn't advertise itself, but it's there underneath every decision that looks from the outside like indifference or restraint. Let's end with the part that matters most, because there's a version of this that isn't healthy, and it's worth naming. Some men don't chase because they're genuinely secure, or because experience taught them something valuable about where their energy belongs. But some men don't chase because they've decided to feel nothing, because the wall went up so completely that intimacy stopped being a goal at all, where it's not security but shutdown, not standards but avoidance dressed up in the language of standards. The difference is visible if you look carefully. The secure man who doesn't chase is warm. He's present. He engages fully with the people in front of him. He's just not reorganizing himself around someone else's uncertainty. The shutdown man who doesn't chase is somewhere else entirely. There's a distance that doesn't close even when someone good shows up. A flatness where depth should be. A pattern of almost but never quite being fully there. One is a man who knows his worth. The other is a man who quietly gave up on being known. And knowing the difference, whether you're looking at someone else or looking at yourself, is probably the most important thing this video can leave you with. If this video described you more accurately than you expected, please subscribe. I would genuinely appreciate it.